Can creativity be cultivated by understanding patterns? When looking around, various patterns can be found. Not only are patterns made by nature, but those made by humans are also frequently found. Patterns seem to be inseparable from human life. In the creation and extinction of nature, patterns appeared naturally and humans made a use of them instinctively. The study of patterns, which is a group of unique designs, in nature was not active in the West. However, in ancient China, there was a study called Lai that deals with unique designs and patterns of nature. Lai deals with the dynamic and refined patterns in nature. The study does not just cling to thoughts on patterns that do not move or change like a mosaic. It reveals vivid patterns in nature's rules of creation and extinction. The secret language and also art of nature are everything such as veins of leaves that spread like a net, patterns on a turtle's back, and a range of mountains. A pattern of a maze is one of many patterns of Lai. It is found in structures of coral, mushrooms, cabbages, and human brain. Then what is a maze? It is a structure with a complex passage that prevents it from finding an exit to go out. The passages in the maze are curved or connected to byways. It is not easy to get out once entering it. Moreover, it is not even possible to go to the very end of the maze. Moles make their homes like a maze to escape predators and stay safe. The origin of the maze is Labyrinth in Greek mythology. Minos, king of Crete, had a wife, Queen Pasiphae. She fell in love with a bull and gave birth to Minotaur with a human body and bull's face. To lock up Minotaur, who is a shame of the family and aggressive, King Minos had father-in-law, Daedalus, a skilled craftsman, to build a complex castle, Labyrinth, with complex passages that is hard to find a way out once entering it. He made Athens send 7 boys and 7 girls every year to Labyrinth to be eaten by Minotaur. However, Theseus, a boy who was sent as the 3rd tribute, tied one end of the ball of a thread to the entrance and walked into the labyrinth while unloosing the thread. He got to the end of the labyrinth and killed Minotaur. And he could find the way out of the labyrinth by following the thread. Because of his story, a labyrinth came to mean a maze. A maze was used a lot in passages and buildings like a royal palace later in Europe. What is a cell? That is the smallest unit that consists of human body. This cell was discovered by Robert Hooke, a scientist, about 350 years ago. Human body is composed of 60 to 100 trillion cells. Because each cell is so small, it can be observed through a microscope. Different parts of the human body have different shapes and functions of cells. A nerve cell that delivers stimuli quickly looks like long electrical cords. Red and white blood cells that freely floats in the blood are in a circular shape. Every cell dies after a certain amount of time and a new cell is formed again. When looking closely at the patterns of cells, they are similar to the patterns found in nature. Cells have countless different structures, but they all have their own rules and orders according to the purpose that they seek and function. What is the reason why humans like to make various patterns by utilizing materials found in nature? Every pattern that nature creates has its own reason. Likewise, patterns that humans make also have their own meanings. The human will to capture the secrets of nature as contained in patterns. Humans can take a step closer to the secrets of nature through patterns. Knowing the distinct characteristics and patterns of nature can help understanding countries and cultures where using similar unique patterns. Patterns tend to be regarded as the visible shapes that are in order. However, they do not only mean what is seen. Although shapes are invisible, they can be unique designs if it is possible to draw them. It is important to observe nature in detail, but it is more important to realize that what is observed needs to be drawn so that others can see it well. Imagination, which is cultivated in the process of making various patterns with materials found in nature, is an important source of creativity to sprout. There are many constellations like Leo and Sagittarius in the night sky. In the old days, people looked at the motions of the stars and found patterns that never change. Although the constellations change its location over time, the patterns that the stars create do not change. Without human imagination, it would have been impossible to find out the patterns in the motions of the stars. The constellation has played a role as a guide for travelers and navigators from ancient times. Stars that consist of constellations vary in the distance and brightness, but they look alike lying side by side because they are so far away from Earth. The reason why the constellations that appear in the sky change with the seasons is because Earth orbits the Sun. From old times, people grouped stars in a certain shape and created a constellation to make it easier to remember. The constellations began to be made in the Arabian Peninsula about 7,000 years ago. Shepherds, who were raising livestock on the grasslands at that time, connected bright stars in the sky and imagined various shapes while watching their flocks of sheep late at night. They usually created the constellations by comparing the shapes with animals such as sheep, bulls, and lions. 36 constellations were found in the relics of the Babylonian Empire that was prospered in the Mesopotamia region around 3000 BC. Phoenician merchants who conducted a trade in the Mediterranean Sea introduced the constellations that was created in Mesopotamia to Greece. The Greeks associated the characters in Greek mythology with the constellations. As a result, the night sky turned into a giant painting telling about the myths. Ptolemy, an ancient Greek astronomer, wrote a book, Almagest, in 150 AD. This book introduced 48 constellations that were created during the Greek era. These constellations have since been brought to Europe and are still in use today. A lightning pattern was used to be carved or drawn when making objects in primitive agricultural society. Since ancient times, lightning symbolized a divine revelation to humans. The flashing light with a scary sound was also believed to be God's will to punish humans. For this reason, lightning patterns were often drawn in ritual utensils used for the ceremony to promise to follow the god's will and to pray for protection and safety. Moreover, because patterns are continuously repeated, they symbolize the origin of the universe, which is the universe has no beginning and no end. They also contain wishes for longevity. What is the purpose of studying patterns created by nature? Patterns of organisms contain the traces of life and death that the organisms have been through. Therefore, by understanding patterns, getting closer to the secrets of nature are possible. It usually rained after lightning, a natural phenomenon. In ancient agricultural society, rain was highly valuable. Human wishes to invoke rain was contained in the lightning patterns carved in ritual utensils. Thus, the reason why humans make objects using the original or mimicked patterns of nature is because they want to have a creative life and holy and beautiful death. What is the logical basis on the recognition of pattern? Everyone in nature feels comfortable. In contrast, when looking at empty spaces or dull walls, it gives feelings of anxiety or fear. This is why people were highly interested in carving or drawing patterns in their building or objects. Objects with patterns feel beautiful, but humans did not use patterns just to pursue beauty. They also used patterns for psychological reasons. The pattern of a fruitful cluster of grapes was used to pray for having many children. In addition, the pattern of a scary ghost was used as a charm for the protection from other bad spirits. The Roman army, which ruled the world, used many tactics utilizing patterns. In the old days, the patterns of animals and plants in nature were used a lot. However, the patterns of geometry are frequently used today. The patterns made using geometric shapes such as a straight and curved line, triangle, and squares give a simple and tidy impression. Mathematically, patterns consist of dots, lines, faces, and colors, and they are orderly arranged. Patterns are utilized in many fields such as architecture, painting, sculpture, and craft. Sometimes patterns were used as a shamanistic symbol like a charm, and also used to boast one's power and existence. But basically, patterns that were made to fulfill the human instinct to escape the feelings of emptiness and fear has the purpose of pursuing beauty endlessly. Many organisms in nature are excellent artists who draw and utilize patterns well. To find a better mate, animals make bigger and more colorful unique designs. They also use different patterns to build more sturdy shelters. Plants and animals are creating patterns that humans have never imagined before. It is repetitive, but the traces of creations and extinctions of nature are entirely contained in patterns. Patterns of animals in fossils provide information about a natural environment of the time the animals lived. The traces of wind remained on the rocks and webbed patterns give a help to understand the climate of the area in the past. Even with one shape, humans can make countless patterns based on it. When human imagination is added to the mystical rules of nature, the number of patterns becomes infinite. It is not just one big unique design that fills the vast universe. Very small patterns are gathered and become a slightly bigger unique shape. As those unique shapes continue to combine and create new ones, they have become what the vast universe looks like today. A star has a myriad patterns. A group of stars makes a constellation, and countless constellations have come together and become the universe today. The Korean idiom "a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with the first step" sounds very convincing. A term artificial intelligence is often mentioned these days. Topics regarding machine learning, which machines can learn by themselves anything, is also frequently brought up. In addition, deep learning that is based on an artificial neural network is talked about many a time. These are all unfamiliar terms. In order to understand the neural circuit, the structures and functions of neurons need to be learned. A neuron that plays a key role for pattern recognition consists of a dendrite, soma or cell body, axon, and synapse. A dendrite and a neuron receive signals from other neurons. A soma or cell body generates electrical signals after gathering all the information delivered from the dendrites. The electrical signals flow along an axon, and they are passed to the next neurons at the end of a neuron, which is a synapse. The more the synapses are activated, the bigger they get. The synapses that are rarely stimulated get smaller and disappeared eventually. The process in which the ability of synapses is strengthened and weakened in response to use or disuse is called synaptic plasticity. The synapses that are randomly created become one complete neuron they go through the process of synaptic plasticity. The networks of neurons that are intertwined like a mesh is called neural circuit. It is known that there are about 100 billion neurons in the human brain. Recent studies found out that the actual number of neurons in human brain is about 86 billion. Still, it is a huge number. Although the structures and functions of single neurons seem simple, the neural circuits make it possible to process the complicated information by connecting neurons together. Then what relation does the neural circuit have with neurons? Neurons are typically connected to each other in a hierarchical structure. Artificial neural networks were made by mimicking this. This allows deep learning to be possible. Computers that can think through learning is deep learning. What would a world where computers can learn and think like humans look like? Recently, active research on deep learning was been done in the US in Silicon Valley. Deep learning refers to making computers think and learn like humans. Thus, now computers have come to be an artificial presence with consciousness. Deep learning is a technology used to combine or classify collected materials or data. For example, computers cannot differentiate between pictures of a chicken and a duck like humans can. So, machine learning was designed. Machine learning is a technology where a computer can classify numerous amount of data inserted. If a picture similar to one already classified as a chicken is inserted, the computer will interpret and classify the picture as a chicken. Out of the many machine learning algorithms made to classify data, deep learning is a descendant of artificial neural networks. Deep learning is a method of machine learning that was made to overcome the limits artificial neural networks have. Thus, the beginning and progress of deep learning coincides with the history of artificial neural networks. The purpose of deep learning is to make predictions based on classification, just like the purpose of studying math is to create a prediction program. With deep learning, Computers can discover a pattern from numerous amounts of data and analyze it just like people can. There are two types of classification: supervised learning and unsupervised learning. Most machine learning algorithms before deep learning was based on supervised learning. Simply put, supervised learning works like this. First, the computer is given information. For example, we provide a picture and teach that this is a picture of a duck. Based on this learned information, the computer recognizes pictures of ducks. Unsupervised learning, on the other hand, skips the step of feeding the computer information. Even without the information that this is a picture of a duck, the computer learns by itself that this is a picture of a duck. Compared to supervised learning, it is a very advanced technology. However, the downside is that it requires computers that can do fast calculation. Humans determine what the information they have gathered until now mean by looking at and listening to words, shapes, videos, and audio. For computers to recognize patterns, we need to insert data ahead of time and have the technology to analyze the characteristics of newly inserted data by contrasting it with already inserted data. Today, pattern recognition technology is rapidly developing together with the growth of the robot industry. Specific examples include visual and audio recognizing robots, automatic zip code recognition equipment, and automatic fingerprint recognition. Humans have always been curious about the essence of light emitted from the sun, light which makes everything in the world visible. As a result, numerous scientists and philosophers came up with theories about light. Over time, the theories have narrowed down to two. In mid-1600, Isaac Newton academically wrote about the properties of light. He claimed light was made up of particles called corpuscles. However, Dutch scientist Huygens, who lived around the same time, claimed that light was a wave, like energy's wave motion. Although Huygens could explain the reflection and refraction of light with light waves, because of Newton's high reputation and because light can travel through a vacuum, even where there is no medium, his claim was not accepted at the time. However, the theory of light waves was clearly proven in 1801 with Young's observation of interference of light waves. Since then, Fresnel observed the interference and diffraction of light multiple times, and in 1850 Foucault showed that the speed of light is slower in liquid than in air. This disproved Newton's corpuscular theory because according to the corpuscular theory, the speed of light should be faster in liquid and solids than in air. How can patterns of waves and vibrations be utilized? How are the patterns we can imagine being used? We can easily think of patterns on wallpapers. Wallpapers make use of natural creatures like flowers, trees, fish, or dogs, while some use geometric shapes like triangles, rectangles, and circles as patterns. Although the patterns used are all different, wallpapers all have one thing in common: one or multiple patterns appear repeatedly under a given rule. This is why we feel stable and at ease when looking at wallpapers. Clothes also have many different kinds of patterns. There are patterns made up of lines and shapes, such as horizontal stripes, vertical stripes, check patterns, and patterns made up of colorful floral pattern. Patterns on clothing sometimes also determine the image of the person wearing it. For example, people who wear lavish patterned clothing have an active and adventurous image, while those who wear monochromatic clothes have a proper and clean image. Not only does patterns provide aesthetic value, but is also used in many scientific technologies. For example, by mimicking the patterns on dragonflies' wings, we can make planes with light but strong wings, and by using the geometric characteristics of patterns we can make buildings that are both beautiful and sturdy at the same time. Patterns are also drawn on the surface of buildings for aesthetic reasons. This is because humans have a tendency to avoid empty spaces. In other words, the human eye always searches for a place to rely on and feels a kind of relief after finding it. Also, when people are visually attracted to something, they tend to observe it closely. Patterns themselves have the power to attract people's attention. While there are patterns that are naturally made, there are also patterns that are artificially created. Artificial patterns include geometric patterns made up of points and lines, abstract patterns with symbolic meaning, figurative patterns that uses specific subjects in nature, such as plants and animals, and more. You have probably seen a wave pattern appear on overlapping mosquito nets when the sun is shining down brightly. The wave pattern moves when you move the mosquito net or change its angle. Such patterns appear not only on mosquito nets but anywhere where there is a pattern with regularly spaced intervals that is repeating and overlapping. We call this the Moire effect and Moire pattern. The Moire effect is a big concern when regarding digital cameras and televisions. This is because when narrow stripes are shown on the television screen, a Moire pattern appears around it. Imaging equipment have red, green, and blue pixels to produce color. Because the location of these pixels are slightly different, the images they make are slightly out of grid. Eventually, when such images overlap, they produce a Moire pattern. To avoid the Moire effect, those on television avoid wearing striped clothes. Here pixels refer to points on a television screen, the smallest unit that makes up the screen of a television or transmission pictures. The more pixels you have on a screen, the more precise and detailed reproductions you get. We call this having a high resolution. Moire patterns, which is a kind of interference pattern, is not just all bad. For many measurements, Moire patterns are used very usefully. For example, when you draw horizontal stripes on an object and bend it based on the object's curves, you get a Moire pattern. Because the Moire pattern that occurs here appears as contour lines, curved lines on a map that indicates the height and unevenness of an index by connecting points from the same altitude above sea level, we can easily determine an object's steepness. If we apply this to the human body, we can identify health problems such as spine defects. We can utilize patterns even more broadly if we can draw out patterns that are not visible. For example, if we can draw sound waves, something we can hear but not see, it would greatly help those with visual impairments. For instance, bats use sound waves to locate and avoid obstacles. Bats can fly fast and safely in the dark because they can visualize sound waves bouncing back from obstacles. Today, ways to understand and visualize sound, which is made up of vibrations and waves, are being studied actively. Of course, we know that there is always a force, gravity, that pulls two objects together, no matter how small the mass is. This allows communication between the two objects. Objects communicate with each other through vibrations and waves. Also, if we can visualize sounds, we can distinguish people just by their voices. For example, it is not easy to distinguish whether a voice from an audio file is really someone's voice or someone else imitating someone's voice. However, because everyone's voice has a unique wave frequency, if we can draw out people's voices, we can easily identify who the real owner of a voice on an audio file is. Thus, we should always keep in mind that patterns are not just simple shapes around us, but something that has an important effect on our lives. Goethe once said, "The wave is the primordial phenomenon which gave rise to the world." Recently, researchers in somatics, the study of sounds, have studied sound by putting sand on a metal plate and making sounds on the plate, which makes the sheet vibrate. Depending on a sound's wavelength, vibration, and tone, such as one from a violin bow, different patterns are formed. As we see these outstanding mysterious shapes, we become curious and have questions. We can see many of the patterns we see on the metal plates in the natural world, such as on tortoises and leopards. The Yellow River Map in Lo Shu Square is a book that became the basis of ancient Chinese prophecy and mathematics. The Yellow River Map is a drawing of 8 trigrams Fu Si made on the I Ching, Book of Changes, based on what he saw at the Yellow River. The Lo Shu Square is a grid that Yu the Great got at a flooding river. With it, Yu the Great made the laws on how to rule the dynasty. In other words, the Yellow River Map was seen on the Sunhua River on the way down from Baekdu Mountain after doing a ritual worship as a marking on the back of a dragon's back, and the Lo Shu Square is a marking the emperor saw on the back of a tortoise at a flooding river, and it is a phenomenon that only enlightened people can see. It may be hard to see, but somatics and Lo Shu Square are related. Although energy has discontinuities, the value of the energy that makes up the discontinuities are determined by the frequency of vibrations. After the energy is determined, a form is made. Everything in the world has a different frequency. Everything has their own unique sound. When you vibrate a building, it can collapse under some circumstances. Likewise, the Earth has its own frequency, so the world could explode if you turn on its frequency. Likewise, vibrations can not only make things but also have the power to break them apart. Then why is everything in the world at rest? According to Newton's law of motion, for an object to be at rest, the forces acting on it has to cancel each other out, making the sum of the forces acting on it be zero. This is easy to understand when you think of tug of war. When both sides pull the string with equal force, the string does not move. A group of unique designs make up a pattern. Vibrations and waves are also a pattern made out of numerous unique designs.